Hi, yeah. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Artists of Data Science Happy Hour, Friday, May 7th. Excited to have all of you guys here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to hang out with me today, Friday, May 7th. Man, I can't believe it. You know why? Because tomorrow is my son's first birthday. I can't believe it has been 1 year already. Happy birthday, baby Jagad. Um, 1 year. Damn, we survived. Can't believe it. So super excited to have all of you guys here. I think there might have been some type of mix up in the calendar. I don't know, but if you are um, part of the newsletter, then you know that the office hours are happening. I got a few messages from folks talking about they were not able to see the happy hour appear in their schedule. Not sure what that's all about, but it is every single Friday. So super excited to have you guys here. How's everybody doing? Vivian, how you doing?
Good.
How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been pretty busy, just working on projects and stuff. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I had a quite a busy week as well. Uh, we're doing like this data strategy thing at work, right? Which involves just talking to a whole lot of people. So, was doing a ton of interviews all the week. I probably spent at least 15 hours, 16 hours in meetings this week. It sort of felt like that's probably an accurate number as well. Um, but yeah, man, it was one heck of a week. So decided to take today off just to kind of relax and not do anything, which was nice. So some new people in the house. How's it going? We got Tor's in the house, man. Good to see you again, Tor. Simran, Marina, got Eric, Joe. How you guys doing? So if anybody wants to kick us off with a question, please, by all means, go for it. Go ahead and unmute your mic if you have a question, and we'll be happy to take your questions.
I was thinking about just especially with COVID happening and stuff. I've seen a lot of people like just on social media and stuff like that getting some data stuff like really wrong. So something I've been thinking about this week is like how do you handle those people? I mean, sure, there's like people at jobs and things like that you have to like describe data things to that are not data people. But what about just in your regular life when you're just hanging out with friends or something, and then somebody says something like really wrong, and like, I guess that's kind of just what I've been thinking about is like in what ways do you see lay people sort of like getting things like super wrong, and how do you handle that? Like, because I don't know about a lot of people, but I don't really necessarily want to like feel like I'm hijacking a conversation or something or steamrolling people. A lot of stuff can get really political, stuff like that. But
Right.
also it annoys me because I'm a data scientist.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So my typical response to like any type of bullshit I hear from people is I just say, "Oh, that's really interesting. Where did you get that bit of information from, or how did you arrive to that conclusion? I'd love to kind of, see your perspective on that. Walk me through how you arrive at this conclusion." That's typically my go-to response, and then from there they tend to, be like, "Oh, I just read it somewhere. I just saw it somewhere. I'm just parroting something I saw somewhere else." And then I'm like, "Okay, well, did you put in any work to like verify that or anything like that?" But that's kind of my go-to tactic is just, hey, walk me through your logic and how you got to this conclusion, and you know, see if we can have a discussion or dialogue about it. Joe, what about you?
Um, I guess I've had a fair share of innumeracy and idiots in my life. Um, I think anymore, I don't say anything, and it may sound like a cop out, but I just unless it's something that's fundamentally stupid. But I mean, the amount of like fundamental stupidity in society right now and in the world, I think it's just reached like a record high. So like I don't know. For me, I just pick my battles wisely, right? Because otherwise, you could be correcting people all day, frankly. And I suppose is that like the best use of your time or brain cells or patience? So I don't know. I mean, I yeah, somebody says in the chat, this is a time that everybody's an expert, and that's so true, right? Marina says that, and it's just, I don't know. Personally, I'm over it. I don't even bother correcting people anymore. I just shut the fuck up and like let them just say their thing, and then I just move on. So I didn't probably give any useful advice except maybe just pick your battles and choose your time wisely. I think is what I'm saying. Like otherwise, you're going to get into arguments with idiots, and there's no shortage of those at this point. So.
Yeah, that's absolutely good advice, because there's some people who might just be up for having a intellectual conversation about it, and there's some people who just will defend their point no matter how ridiculous it is, just because it is their point. And those type of people, I'm just like, oh, cool, man, that sounds really interesting, fascinating. Thanks for sharing that piece of information and teaching me something.
Which is funny because that's almost like the ultimate diss. Just to politely say, oh yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. I'm interested in hearing what other people are doing. So let's hear from Russell on this topic, and maybe Marina. We got somebody new, Marina. So after Russell, let's hear from you. And in the meantime, guys, if you guys have any questions, I will add you to the queue. Just go ahead and shoot me a message. Let me know you got a question, and I'll put you into the queue. Russell, go for it.
Thank you. Evening to everyone. Good to see you all here. Yeah, so I typed a quick message in the chat, just saying that, a genuine ignorance, a lack of knowledge, giving light to a stupid action or discussion can often be accepted, certainly if there's willing to change with the advent of new information. What I find far more difficult is the willful ignorance or willful stupidity or willful bias or prejudice that's often driven by other means, confirmation bias, things like that. If there's a benefit to acting stupidly and people do that despite their better objective assessment, if they were in a right mind, then that's what I think is the greater problem. And I think that's an affliction that affects a lot of the world, particularly in the political playing grounds,
Marina, are you there, Marina?
Hey,
hey.
Hi. I'm
Hi.
kind of new, so
yeah, I've seen a couple of times.
But I agree. I normally don't say anything, but I totally agree. There is tons of experts out there. It's just tons. Like everybody's an expert right now. Everybody has an opinion, and I think that you have to keep it to yourself most of the times. But if not, like Joe said, you have to pick your battles. And I think the whole thing of saying this is interesting, I just found it very useful. It's just, oh, this is interesting, and just talk about something else. It's just because it's the confirmation bias. Everybody right now has an opinion about something and look for sources of information that confirm what they think. That is in all fields. And you may want to have an opinion about certain things. On the other, years ago, you didn't have even an opinion about medical terms, and now everybody has an opinion. I'm like, that's
it used to be,
and it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter what's the data. You can always, and also that's almost true in statistics. You can always can do the statistical analysis in a way that confirms your hypothesis.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's like they used to be only like academics would write in journals and they'd battle it out in white papers, but now everybody is an academic and they battle it out in the comment section. What the world has come to. Vivian?
There's a really good book you should check out. It's called Fantasyland.
Okay, nice. Who's that by?
Oh shit, I can't remember. But anyway,
typed in Fantasyland and some weird things are coming up in my Google.
I'm sure some weird shit. Okay, so yeah, Google like Fantasyland the book, but it talks about especially in America, like we're uniquely situated to, I guess, have whatever opinion you want, right? Our country was basically founded by hucksters, also known as pilgrims. And so it's kind of like, How America Went Haywire, that book. It's fascinating to read, and it's fascinating because it also does a really good job explaining how we got to today, where you just have so much disinformation. We basically just live in this like mass hallucination where, depending on your view, you can find something to confirm that, and that's just the reality of it. So even if you do try and talk facts these days to people, the common rebuttal is, well, yeah, but how do I know that's true, right? So it makes the job of a data person very fascinating right now, because you literally have multiple alternate realities. And I think it's going to be one of those things, I think, increasingly for data professionals who may feel like they have the right answers, and most likely do. How do you convince people who may suffer from extreme innumeracy, for example, right? Like they aren't number savvy, or they just choose not to care. I think COVID, like the recent pandemic, like illustrated that perfectly. Despite science or facts, people just come up with their own alternate realities of shit. And basically it's like, well, yeah, but the scientists don't know what they're talking about, right? But the guy on InfoWars, he totally knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy.
I mean, I'd wager that the entirety of human civilization and economics was built on mass hysteria, government, and money and stuff. Right?
That's so true.
You take Noah Harari's argument for it, but I mean, and when you talk about innumeracy, it could be like, because there are people out there who don't know how to add proportions, right? So they might say A over B plus C over D is equal to A plus B over C plus D. Well, obviously that's not how you go about doing it and adding proportions and stuff. So just basic things like that, I think, is what Joe's referencing to when he talks about innumeracy. But Vivian, so you're unmuted.
Well, I just have kind of a follow-up on this of like, so I read that book that I think it was Dave Knickerbocker mentioned before, of like the Calling Bullshit book. And so I've read that one. And then I also have heard in passing, I actually don't know that, I didn't fact check this, but I've heard that Finland added a thing to their curriculum of like, as part of their just general education, like with high school equivalent education, to have a class that teaches students how to like data sources and things like that, and how to like evaluate whether things are true and stuff like that. And then after reading that book and thinking about that, like just what ways do people see a solution to this? Because like we're only moving towards in the future like a more data centric future. So like, is the gap just, do people kind of like anticipate the gap continuing to get wider of like people who do and don't know data? Or like, how can we solve this? Like what sort of things do you see? Like at what point will we reach a critical turning point where it's like, all right, this is too much of a problem and something has to be done about it? Or just thoughts on that.
That's an interesting question. Actually, I bought that book, Calling Bullshit. I have not read it yet. It's sitting right there in my bookshelf, and I'm excited to get into it. But I mean, can you kind of elaborate on that question? I'm not sure if I really understood. When you say, when talking about people who don't understand data, do you mean just like what Joe's talking about in numeracy?
Yeah.
Or
well, I guess I'm just thinking in general. Maybe it's less of a question and more just like if anybody has any thoughts or something of like, what can we do / what ways do you see this becoming a problem in the future in which we'll have to deal with it?
I don't know that it's fixable, honestly. You're dealing with, I mean, you have the conduits of rapid misinformation. It's called social media, right? And countries are taking advantage of this, like state actors. And so it's, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg, but it's just.
So what do you think then about like how Facebook has specifically started trying to like fact check and like flag people's posts as being, is that effective at all? Like, do you think, or what other ways could be more effective?
I don't know. If we could figure that out, I would give that person a Nobel Prize, honestly, because it's like, this is the biggest issue for humanity right now. Honestly, it's like you have a pandemic going on, right? That can't even be fixed because you got misinformation about it, right? You can't even get people to agree on how to solve the problem, even though it's very clear how you could do it. So I don't know. I mean, I got off social media in part because I think in large part because I was tired of listening to my stupid relatives talk about, you know, this and that, the other thing, you know, just, I mean, I call it the Derpacene. Like you have the Anthropocene. It's like the world right now is being overrun by just like extreme derpiness across the board. And I don't know how you solve that because it's not just the US, it's like everywhere. So
do you think that like what do you ever imagine so do you think the gap will just keep getting wider, or do you ever imagine like a place where, I don't know, like maybe education changes and so like a new generation or something kind of
I
like,
don't know. I mean, how did the Enlightenment happen, right?
yeah.
You're going through basically like the dark ages, but in a different way. And I honestly think that's what's happening right now. And I hate to say it because it's interesting because you have like this whole data science movement and everyone wants to do data, but I'm like, I honestly think it's going to be fueled for different purposes that aren't what we might want.
I mean, what about just introducing logic back into like elementary school, right? Adding just formal logic back in. Like you don't really need to be a college age student before you start taking a class in formal logic. Why not we introduce that in grade school or middle school or high school or something like that, right? I think that's an easy fix.
Mm-hmm. But it's crazy though, right? So I mean, because if you listen to arguments on any viewpoint on any side of the equation, people try and logically argue it, but they're using their own information. So it's like, if you can't come to a consensus in what's reality, then, you know, somebody raise their hand. I'll shut up.
Yeah, Tor, go for it.
No, I mean, this is an extremely interesting topic because, like, it's information overload, information overflow. There's just too much out there. And going back in my early days in school, which is now starting to, it's been a while. But, you know, one of the things that we had was social studies, and where we were learning more about reading newspapers and questioning the articles that were listed, for example. We had that as part of our school in Norway at the time. It's still in school. And I think really the bottom line here is that you have to start that early. You have to go back into school, like you mentioned about logic, about questioning things, like to understand that like the viewpoints that are presented aren't necessarily the right one. That there are multiple angles to every story. Now, with the society the way it's going now, you're just seeing people going more and more into the famous silos, and that's all they get for information. Is Facebook, Google, and these companies helping? No, not at all. To me, they are just making everything worse because even I can see it in my own profile and on my own LinkedIn profiles, etc., that I don't have control of the information I'm getting. For a while, I thought I did, but I don't. I have absolutely no control over what the information and when I get it. And there's nothing that's driving me more nuts at the moment when I'm looking for something or I want something. I can't even trust whether or not that information that's being presented to me in the search is is the best for me. And I remember way back in when Google started, they were officially that famous search engine that didn't charge anybody to get ranked, et cetera, et cetera. And now Google exactly where they were, which is totally opposite to what their initial philosophy was when they started their own search engines, competing with Yahoo, MSN, all of these, America Online, et cetera. So for me, the key, I think, is going back to school. We have to teach people to think critically and to question the information they get and to not take everything just for granted.
Love that. Thank you, Tor.
So I thought of one more thing while you were talking, Tor, just like how they found that, you know, there was that Netflix documentary, I forget what it's called, but it was about like how the algorithms are set out for all the social media sites and Google and all the things to like confirm, to basically give you, you know, they support confirmation bias, basically. Like they know you so well that they just give you, and like in giving you what you want to see, it's also, yeah, creating echo chambers. So like in some ways, have we gone too far? Like, do we, you know, do Google and Facebook and stuff like have a responsibility to almost like back off on some of this, you know, ultra algorithmizing everything Like, is that, do you think that they have like a social responsibility to let go of some of that?
Love to hear from somebody on the topic. Rena, would you like to chime in here?
Yeah. In the UK, we have something called censorship. And on the big internet world, we don't have censorship. So I've worked with a lot of academics who work in the research arena, and they always challenge people's research. But that's never done in the educational arena, especially online. So there is a lot of policing that's required, especially when it comes to future generations applying ethics to what they're doing. There is no arena for application of ethics anymore. When you're looking at future generations taking their information from the World Wide Web, are they verifying it? Are they validating that information? Any sort of data or statistics, is that getting validated across the world? There are a lot of questions, especially around ethics, censorship, and whether it's valid for somebody to see things they shouldn't see. Would you expose a child to certain elements of information that could influence their perception of the world for the future? So there's a huge arena, and I get it. You're challenging it, but how can you police it?
It's a very interesting thing. Something that just popped to mind was, just around ethics, right? So you typically professions who have some type of duty to the general public come together and they have a type of code of conduct. For example, the doctors have their Hippocratic oath. I'm sure lawyers have like the lawyer's oath or some shit like that. There's probably something out there for accountants. I don't fucking know. But for data scientists who are doing things that are really touching a bunch of people everywhere, is it on us to come together as a group of practitioners and say, you know what, this is how we should act with our work and how we should conduct ourselves on the job? Be interested to hear some thoughts on that. Eric, what do you think?
I kind of missed the very beginning of the question. What is it about? I heard stuff about like statistical validation. Then I was reading Russell's comment about social media, which is dynamite.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to just call you out of the blue there. But Rena, I see you're unmuted as well. So if you want to jump in, go for it. But we're just talking about ethics and stuff. If you want to.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a member of the accountancy profession, and globally, we all have a universal code of ethics, which we have to abide by, otherwise we get stripped of our license. There is no such thing for the robotics community, and there is no such thing at the moment globally for the data science community. So recently, I read an article in the European Union where they are now running a whole series of restrictions on the way we use artificial intelligence. So in the same way data and data protection has now been created with GDPR, they're also doing the same for artificial intelligence in the European Union. So those legislations will start rolling out. So then it becomes a game of advantage. Which country can you put your data in to take advantage of exploiting that data? And that's when it becomes a global playing field. So obviously we all know about like Russian servers and being able to put your data in Russia and do what the hell you like. But then you come across a whole stream of ethics going on around the world, and there's no one universal connection across the world right now around ethics.
So I'm actually, so I read that some of that same regulation that was coming out of the EU on the AI regulation. It's really interesting. It was dense, but it's definitely important to be talking about. One of the things that I guess I kind of have a couple of thoughts on it. One is that it's early enough, I guess, that people are still in this, like, I think we still have kind of a starry-eyed vision of, like, oh, I just throw data into ML and magic will pop out and I will magically get a great, awesome job doing, and just like magic all over the place here. And as I've been reading more and more about AI ethics and in particular, like bias mitigation and algorithms and things like that, like at least where I am and where I've seen lots of lots of people like me, is at the stage of like knowing that it's a problem and talking about it and knowing we want to fix it, but like not knowing how yet. And I think that next step is like, there is a how. Like there are bias mitigation algorithms, there are like 72 different fairness metrics. And so if those are like incorporated into, whether it's incorporated into like curricula in school, just like we teach assumptions of regression, understanding what fairness means and what bias actually looks like and how to treat it. I don't know, because I'm not an educator, so I don't know where that would necessarily fit, but it could certainly fit into professional development and continuing education credits. And that's something that I would love to be able to have like some of my personal professional development allowance, like put that towards that kind of a learning. And then the other thing is, since you mentioned like the international battle of, where you push your data, right? I mean, that already kind of exists in companies in like manufacturing, right? And so the ISO has standards for that. And if you want to work with certain like large companies, they will not work with you. They won't even have a conversation with you about manufacturing contract unless you have an ISO certification. And so if an ISO data certification exists, it may, I'm not sure, but if it doesn't exist, then it's got to be on somebody's desk right now, because that would then kind of, I think, help avoid that. There's always going to be the lower quality, the unvetted, the black market of data or whatever, like just like there is for anything. But yeah, I think that having an international standard on it could go a long way.
Eric, thanks so much for that. So I'm gonna call on Brandon real quick. I'm gonna give you a quick summary of the question that we're talking about, right? So we're talking that most professions like doctors say they have the Hippocratic Oath, and apparently accountants have a global oath. And I didn't know you're an accountant, Rena. I'm always talking shit about accountants. It's because I can't do you guys a job because it's incredibly fucking boring. And then there's also code of ethics for even like plumbers and shit like that. But we don't have a code of ethics for like the AI community, machine learning practitioners, data scientists. Do you think that's something that we should come together as a community and, I don't know, talk about it, agree on something? Or
Yeah, sure. I think we do. I hadn't actually given it too much thought. I see a lot of talks about AI ethics and stuff, but I haven't really dived deep into it. I think it's a good thing. I remember when I was in undergrad, I was in Tau Beta Pi, which is like the engineering fraternity kind of thing. And I remember reading something like that says that you would be neutral to like stick with the science and the facts and like be neutral to parties or something like that. So that's the closest thing I ever got to pledging anything.
Yeah. There's the episode I did with Paul Thagard. He pretty much came up with like a Hippocratic oath for people who are in our field for machine learning practitioners, and it's really interesting the way he broke it down. I'll have to summarize it, maybe put it up as a LinkedIn post because it's really interesting. Joe, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me of the conversations I've been having with some people who are working on the actually the AI ethics for the IEEE. They are. It's such a shit show right now. To come to an agreement on like what AI ethics are comprised of or how you're going to enforce it. It's like an engineering society as well, right? So coming up with a standard is tricky for a variety of reasons. And it's also interesting too, I think like the Hippocratic Oath, for example, right? Like that's kind of a universally applicable thing. Like doctors should keep patients alive and do no harm and that kind of thing. AI is tricky, right? Because depending where you live, there's different use cases for it. If you go to places like China, they have a much different view of how AI should be used than the United States or Europe. Anyone who says differently, I mean, go to China and go see for yourself. It's way different. There's mass surveillance, and the goals are different, right? It's not to sell you ads, it's to control your life. It's a fundamentally different place. In the US, corporations rule the show, right? So it's like we use AI to sell you cool shit, and track you, and so we can sell you better stuff, right? This is all ad-driven society here. So the ethics, I think, really, there's an old saying like, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome, right? And I think that definitely applies to AI ethics, because there's not a universal, I don't think there's ever going to be a universal AI ethics, precisely because every society is different and there are different incentives in how you apply AI and the outcomes you get. The day that you see a universal AI ethics is like the day that, we're all living in peace and harmony and all agreeing on facts and all that shit, which is like never going to happen. So.
Thank you very much, Joe. Appreciate that. Great start to the conversation. So let's go ahead and turn into some questions here. I see one in the chat from Eric. Eric, go for it.
Yeah. So I'm trying to understand the difference between an optional when making a function in Python specifically. I would imagine it's applicable to other languages as well. The difference between an optional argument where I just pass something like equals none, right? And then the asterisk args, and then the asterisk KW args. I don't understand what it is. And the reason I'm asking is because I've been working on this network X pull request thing. I posted about it on LinkedIn. So if you've seen it, you've seen it. And one of the things I wanted to change was to add an optional argument to allow people to pass in a list of 2 items to set a horizontal and a vertical axis boundary margin for their plot. And so I figured out that that's just an optional argument where I can just set it equals to none and pass it in elsewhere. But I always see that args and kwargs thing in like all the documentation that I'm reading, and I just haven't the foggiest idea what it is, and it might be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely don't have a good answer for you. The only thing I know is that you use those when you don't know exactly how many arguments your functions are going to take, and that the args and the KWARGS kwargs thing, those are interchangeable. It's like the asterisks. I think that is the most important. But I'll turn this over to like the proper software engineers, or Vivian, if you know, definitely go for it.
Well, the asterisk it means like unpack these things. That's what the asterisk is for, so that you can pass stuff in and then it like unpacks it.
So do you mean like if I had a function that was like add these arguments or something, like add A and B, and for B I put an asterisk?
Because you can use stuff. I haven't like done this like today or something, but just like I've used the asterisks before to like if when I'm making my own function and putting in a list, and then you can put asterisk and then it unpacks all the things in the list. Like that's like saying like unpack this list.
Unpack like in a loop, or unpack like
it will take each item, sort of similar to like a list comprehension or something. Like we'll take out each item individually.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So like, yeah. Also think of the K in front of args, and there's a difference. It's actually horribly confusing, and I hate that they do this. So there's arguments and there's kwarguments with K.
I think KW is supposed to stand for keyword, right?
Right. Okay. And what do you think that means?
I saw an example on real Python. I was like, set something equal to something. So rather than just like passing an argument, it set it equal to something, but I just don't know how I would use that.
I think you're getting there. So when you think of it, so a keyword argument, right? You're going to be passing in something like probably a dictionary, right? That has a key and a value to it, right? So args would be a non-keyword argument. So maybe something like a tuple or an array or something like that, right? But like, so there's no, it's something going to iterate over perhaps, maybe, but it doesn't have a keyword attached to it. And so that's typically how you
I was thinking that arguments were the things like, say you're like doing something in scikit-learn or whatever, and you look at the documentation, the arguments are the things that you have to define the value, and those have to come first. So like when you're passing in like xtrain, like you have to give it that for it to run at all. That's not a predefined thing. You have to tell it. And then all the things that are like when you want to change the parameters and they have presets, those are keyword arguments. And so you can, that's like I was under the impression that arguments were like the things that you can list first and then it auto assigns those things. You don't have to be like, like when you're working in some package, you don't have to be like X equals, I'm so bad at describing this, but basically it's like the things that you can list
You don't have to
without,
write data equals DF. You can just put DF and it knows.
yeah,
it's
and it
data 'cause
knows
it's
it
first.
because it's assigning that to the first, and it's assigning those in a row for like what's in the package. And then the other ones, like you have to use the keyword and say keyword equals this and like manually set it to a thing. If that, you know what I'm saying? So
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
those are the keyword arguments, is like the ones that you have to like call out by name and say this equals that, you know, versus
Okay.
like being able to just pass it in as like X and Y.
But
Okay.
you always
So
want to use the asterisk ones when you have, like Viv was saying, when you have variable length. You have an unknown length of arguments you're trying to introduce as your parameters, right? Then it's like, I don't know how many there are. I'm just gonna pass this in and see what happens.
okay. And so the single asterisk would be like you were saying with a dictionary, or sorry, not a dictionary, a list. And then Joe, the double asterisk would be something like a dictionary where you have paired items or something like that.
You got it. Yep.
Cool. Okay. That helps a lot.
Hopefully that helps. Yeah.
Nice. That was really clear. Thank you guys. Really appreciate that. All right. What's up, everybody else? I don't see any questions in the chat, so if anybody would like to take the floor, by all means, go for it. I see Makiko's in the building. Makiko, how's it going?
I have a question.
Just off a bunch of Russian pierogies and drinking tea. I'm relaxing before I start my new job a few weeks from now. So
hey, congratulations. So yeah, tell us about that in a second here. But I saw Brandon was unmuted there. Brandon, go for it.
Yeah, I just had a question if there's no other questions around. Like what are people's thoughts of times when you're doing your job where you sit and think, this isn't data science and I'm worried about how much time I'm spending on this? I'd like to hear other people's opinions on that.
Yeah, I've been thinking that a lot over the last couple of months because of this data strategy thing that I'm working on for my company. There's literally no statistics, machine learning, analytics involved whatsoever. It's mostly data governance, data management, and things of that nature. So I've been thinking that a lot recently, but I just keep reminding myself of that this phrase. You should plant trees where you know you're not going to enjoy the shade. So it's like, all right, I'm doing all this work, and 3 years from now, 4 years from now, I might not be around at this company to enjoy the fruits of my labor and do actual statistics and data science stuff. But Makiko, what do you think?
I mean, like for me, so I feel like if you look at a majority of data scientist jobs, they're not really data science as it like was pitched to me when I like first got into the field. They're really more sort of like strategy analyst roles, with some combination of like data engineering, sort of like nascent data engineering sort of tasks where you have to do like automation and like data quality management, things like that. So, I mean, my response to, I was lucky though, because when I was working over at Teladoc/Livongo, like we had a few people who were doing more like research data science, especially like at Teladoc when we were like, or at least Livongo, we were dealing with chronic conditions, right? So we had this one guy who he had like years of experience in like biomed research, worked for various like, health hospitals or research teams, organizations. And so a lot of the work he was doing was very sort of like research oriented. And it was all about like, how do you design experiments, especially for like, ones that involve human trials. And then how do you combine that with some of the geospatial data and some of the like IoT data that we were getting? But like, I saw work that he was doing and I was like, I think my response to be like, man, even though I'm working as a data scientist, my like work is in data science was basically to just get out as soon as I could and then to go focus on engineering. Because the way I figured it, most of the cool stuff that's happening in the machine learning data science world requires some amount of like product engineering or like data engineering or like ML ops. So that was like my response. That was, okay, well, I'm basically not doing any data science work, even as a data scientist. So maybe I'm just going to go focus on the things that like I actually do enjoy, which is more like the engineering development side. And of course, that meant like quitting my job in the middle of COVID and you know, figuring out that pivot and all that. But I don't know, I think for some people it can be kind of liberating, where it's like, well, you know, I'm not kind of doing what I should be doing for the role anyway. But for others, I imagine it's deeply disappointing. I feel like my first two roles, where it was mostly like key stakeholder management, a lot of like data education, it was a little bit disappointing that I didn't really get to do like as much model development. But at the same time, I think part of it is also a lot of data scientists don't have the skills actually to get things like into production. I think that's the reality of it. So I mean, that's just my kind of 2 cents.
Russell, let's hear from you. I see some good comments here in the chat.
Yeah, I was just being kind of sarcastic, actually. You know, I've got a bit of a dark sense of humor. So firstly, for Brandon's comment, I would say, you know, I have those kind of thoughts, you know, in everyday life. Basically, what am I doing? You know, this should be kind of run-of-the-mill stuff, but actually, really, what am I doing? And then I went on to say, you know, quantum computing, or quantum reasoning. You know, I pretty much all of the time I'm in one of two states: either this is amazing, this is cool, I absolutely love what I'm doing, or, you know, just what am I doing? What am I doing here? What's the reason for this? And I assume that that's similar for a lot of people. You know, I'm seeing you nod your head a little there, Harpreet, so maybe you feel some of this, but I don't think it's unusual, and especially then when you're talking about such a nuanced field as data science, it's going to happen all the more, because, you know, it's new, we're breaking new ground every day. If you're doing something that doesn't feel like you're right on that the crest of the wave, maybe you feel like it's not data science, but, you know, it might be. It just might not be that real cutting edge stuff.
I was literally having those thoughts of what the fuck am I doing? Like 3 hours ago, literally 3 hours ago, and I was sitting here and I was like, this is so stupid. What am I doing? And it was something basic. It was like I was spending so much time going from keyboard to mouse, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is adding up, all this little time that I'm shifting going to my mouse. So I spent an hour just mastering keyboard shortcuts, because I was like, why did I not figure this out sooner in life? Like, that I could just do all the stuff from the keyboard and life would be so much easier. That's a completely different story though. Joe, do you ever feel like, what the fuck are you doing?
Not anymore, but I also like do my own thing now, right? So, but I've been in so many situations, I think, with jobs, and I mean, you know, you talk to any of my friends or whatever, it's like I'm chronically unemployable. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I got strong opinions on how I want to do shit. You know, I'm impatient. You know, all the characteristics that basically lead you to say, like, WTF, like, what am I doing with my time? It happens a lot. And it was only when I finally just made the leap, you know, to, I think, start investing my time in how I saw fit, that you know, I don't have those anxieties anymore. But I would say it was like that was a journey to get there. And like, I know not everybody's in that spot. So, but it's something I would say, you know, if you could at least figure out what nirvana would look like for you, then maybe, you know, or nerdvana or whatever, like, you know, I think there's a lot of benefit to that, because it's, you know, it sucks, because like I know a lot of people who work in jobs, you know, for decades, and they get to the end of their 50s or whatever, and they're like, what the fuck did I just spend all my time doing? Like, this sucks. Happens a lot, actually, right? And like, you know, then they get a Corvette or something and freak out and dye their hair. So yeah, I see this a ton. I've been through it a lot. And you know, there's no shortcut really. I would say, just like, if you want to do something different, then just figure out what that is and start making a path to get there. But like, life's too short, as you say at the end of your podcast, you know, all the time, you know, do something that's going to make sense, you know, but it's, understand too, it's a progression, and you're going to have freakouts. Like, when you do make a leap into something totally new, like, that's not all roses either. Like, it's hard work either way, but I guess, you know, determine, like, what do you want to invest your time in? Do you want to like make money for the man and do meaningless shit your entire career? Like, that's an option. A lot of people do that, you know?
Yeah.
you could make money for yourself, or you could find a job that might be really happy, fulfilling. Like one of the smartest people I know, he's way smarter than I am. He's worked at like hardware stores his entire life, like, and he's happy. He's so happy. He just works as a clerk. And this guy, his IQ is like very high, but he just figured like, look, I don't know what, I don't want to go to, get a corporate job. I'm just going to sell hammers all day and shit. And that's what makes him happy. And I think at the end of the day, like, that's cool. Like, you don't have to take the prescribed path. I know other people who, growing up, who were like professional rock climbers. That's like all they did. And like, that's how they made their living, was like getting, in National Geographic and stuff, and then getting sponsors, and like, that's cool. So there's a lot of things you could do. And I would say, like, just because we're all data scientists, if you're not happy doing that, or you're not doing data science the way you want to, then there's a lot of other options. You could find different jobs, start your own thing, or just do something totally different and go work at a cash register. I don't know. So.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like that guy just he just said, I'm not playing that game. I'm playing my own game, single player game, and went for it. So yeah, that's awesome, man. Love to talk to that guy. Sounds pretty interesting. Let's hear from Vivian, and then let's go to Eric after Vivian on this topic. And then in the meantime, if anybody else has questions, go ahead and send me a message right there in the chat. I see a few new faces. Boom Bam, I can't say your name, sorry. And Brett or Gersimran, if you guys have questions, oddly enough, I can say Gersimran's name. So go for it, Vivian.
Well, as Joe was talking, I was just thinking about how I've known some people like that too. And I always really admire people who can like not take life so seriously, I guess, because I have a tendency to get so serious about everything all the time. And I don't know, I think that it is like a wise person who can not be quite so serious about everything they do. And I was reading a story about like approaching creativity in life and inspiration with a jester's mindset versus like a warrior's mindset. That a lot of times like we value the person who's like the warrior and they like push through all the time and stuff like that. And they're always like, is that a good book?
Literally, this book is called A Kick in the Seat in the Pants, and it's written by Roger Van Eck, and he has 4 roles of the creative process, and 4 roles. One of them is the jester, and one of them is the warrior. So
okay. Well, it was probably it wasn't that book. It was a book called, I can't remember now. It's by the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and then she wrote a book about like creativity.
Okay.
Anyway, but she was just talking in that book about how like the jester like still knows how to like follow leads and like, commitment and stuff like that, but it does it with like more playfulness and not like taking life too seriously, and kind of like taking shots as they come kind of thing, rolling with the punches, and like just being like, approaching things with a sense of like humor and stuff like that. And so I don't know, that just was something that I was thinking about as Joe was talking, that I would like to try to be that person more, because our society definitely values the warrior more often, of like the person who's always like persevering and like grunt, pushing through and everything. But it doesn't always have to be like that. Like you can push through and still have a sense of like playfulness in your own life. But, yeah,
absolutely love that. What was the name of that book again?
I'll just.
Well, it was by the lady who you said wrote Eat, Pray, Love.
Pray, Love.
Yeah, I guess probably two Google searches for that one.
Big Magic is what it's called.
Awesome. Yeah.
By Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yeah, and I was listening to a podcast with Naval Ravikant and Kapil Gupta. There's 2 of them that are floating around. One of them is about like the illusion of hard work, and I highly encourage you guys to check that out. I think you guys might find it interesting. Eric, let's hear from you on this. And again, if anybody has questions, go ahead, let me know right there in the chat, and I'll put you into the queue. Eric, go for it. Do you ever feel like you're like,
Oh, sure. I mean, so in one of my previous roles, I was one of the very early people hired to do a job that was brand new, and it was kind of defined, but it was intentionally pretty wide open and vague. And they ended up hiring, I don't know, 10 or 15 of us, and everybody really took it in different directions. And, kind of to the jester side, I ended up taking it in a way different direction than anyone else. And I had a ton of fun with it. but I also at times felt like this is totally like, I feel like I was a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. And so maybe it just was that, it wasn't the perfect fit, but it was also kind of, Brandon, as you were talking about the original question, it made me think of like role scope creep and how it's so easy to let other people, it's so easy to let other people who need important stuff, like dominate or kind of like change the trajectory of what maybe we thought our roles were going to look like at one point or another. And at to some degree we have control over that, and some degree we don't, right? And so that's something that I keep in mind. And I think about what Mark Freeman talks about, like I threw in the comments, about being the CEO of your company of one, and really like making sure that you are developing the way that you want to develop, because you have one life of you on this planet, and if you drop dead tomorrow, your job would be filled in a month and the company would roll on, and that's all there is to it. And I've really thought about that in the past few weeks, like, dang, like, am I spending enough time like with my partner and enjoying the life that I have with her? Because if I was dead, she'd be real sad and my employer would be real sad until they filled my role, and then no one would even remember me in 90 days, And so like, who would remember me 90 days after I was gone, And so thinking about, being that company of one for myself, like, keeps me in the right mindset, I hope, with my work, but then also just kind of with myself.
Absolutely love that. Yeah, that's a great analogy that Mark always makes, that really resonates with me as well. Makiko, go for it.
I feel like part of it too is that at least like in data science and machine learning, I feel like there's like three primary reasons why, at least like sort of like why I kind of, or why I myself or seen people experience like the what the fuck moments are we doing with our career. Because you first get in, right? And there's all this like promise, and it's like exciting, and it's like you can make all this impact and shiny toys. I imagine it's much the same as like before the dot-com bubble, and if you were like an engineer working in that, I mean, that's what like some of my friends some of my family friends who were engineers at that time, like they talked about that excitement and the shininess and like, we're going to go build someone pets.com and all that. And I feel like, so one reason why I like felt what the fuck in like data science and machine learning was at times was because a big reason was I didn't have the skills at that point to actually do anything useful with the work. So and what that actually means, right, is that like, yeah, you develop a model and you bring all these insights into the business and yada yada yada, but then if you don't have the engineering skills, there's no way you can actually get that model like into the product itself. Then you have to think about like keeping it updated, and then like, does business actually care about your insights, all this other stuff, right? So there's like that one reason of like WTF, right, is that it's kind of like the model building is like what's sold as the, this is the thing that you do to add value in data science machine learning, but it's like literally everything around it, right? It's actually everything around it. Like the model developing itself, it's all nice, and you can use some auto ML to like do model selection or some feature engineering, but and then the second part where I feel like I've seen people go like WTF is like the not having that like internal support and that alignment of like what your work is to the company. And that's like more for people in like leadership roles, but I'd say like that third part is like that alignment of purpose, and like kind of where you are, right? And that was like a big discussion I had with even my own family, right? So I was like looking at different opportunities for an MLE role, and I got 3 offers, and I had a fourth one on the way. And I knew which one I was going with, because I'm like, this is what I need in my career right now. But my parents wanted me to go for like a completely different one, right? And for them, they're like, oh, well, you have more opportunities to climb up the corporate ladder and like all this other stuff, and it's got global reach and it's got a brand name. And then I was like, well, but I want to go for the one which has, first off, the people who are actually excited to have me on the team. That's a really good one. Secondly, collaboration and mentorship, because that's where I am in my career right now. And thirdly, like really clear like deliverables as to like what the role is. Like some of the other offers I got, they're a little bit more sort of like kind of like the Wild West. You know, one of the companies which is just sort of developing that in-house talent right now. You know, and they're like, yeah, you might work like, you know, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, you know, or some nonsense like that. Whereas the company I chose, it's like, yeah, they're like, we don't really like to work after 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you know, and we also don't like to work on weekends, right? And like, so for my parents, they were kind of like, you know, there was something they wanted. For me, there was something that I kind of had to optimize for. A few years, you know, ago. I would have chosen the one that's like go up the career ladder, but you know, the one I chose, for me, it feels right. You know, but in like previous roles, right, like I had that WTF because I either didn't have the skills to like actually be like to do valuable work, or I didn't have like the buy-in or support, or like my purpose was internally aligned, because there were people on my team who were like totally happy. They're really successful as data scientists. And like, if you kind of look at sort of the quality of work that they publish and also kind of why they're doing the work, you know, like this one guy who's just like this amazing like data scientist, and he eventually became a data science manager, right? For him, it was all about like working with improving chronic conditions for people. Like he's very big in the health tech, and that's kind of like his part of his purpose. For me, that wasn't the case necessarily. For me, I get all my value and enjoyment out of the work that I'm doing right now and like what it sort of gives me. You know, but so I think in data science and machine learning, it's really hard to like lose sight of the like, you know, what's valuable to you and what is something that you need like in your career right now. And also to be put in this position where you're sort of providing like features to companies as opposed to like actual transformational like impact. Because a lot of like companies, especially with like the bigger tech ones, it feels like, I don't know, especially like with all the things, you're just kind of like optimizing off of something that's already well established, as opposed to creating something new that's actually valuable for people.
Yeah, like the word that came to mind when you're saying that is like a commodity data scientist. Don't be just a commodity data scientist. If you're going to do work, do something cool, something new. Even if it's okay. So like, let's just take this example that I've been living with in my world. This building a data strategy for this organization. Well, the entire world might be out here and having good data architecture and good data strategy in place and doing crazy stuff. But for this particular company that's been around for, you know, the last 40 years and has been doing really well, they've never done anything like this. So I'm coming in and I'm doing something new, something big, something that's really going to help them progress, and I'll learn a shit ton throughout you know the way. Yeah, maybe I'm not doing data science and fancy sexy shit that I want to do, but at least I feel like I'm helping somebody, right? Like I feel like I'm, you know, the CEO of the company is like the most amazing guy ever. Like I feel really happy to be able to do something new and innovative for him. So you kind of creating the meaning and the purpose for yourself. Brandon, I don't know if we like completely strayed off path from your question. It's kind of the reason why I like asking a bunch of people their responses, just to see how the question starts evolving from person to person. But let me know what you're thinking.
No, I'm good. You know, I think it's an open-ended question anyway, so it's good to hear people's different perspectives on it.
Russell brings up an interesting point, though, right? I mean, in the thread here, just about burnout in general from the pandemic. Like, data people ain't the only people I know who are burned out hard. Like, I think everybody that I know is they just want to do something else, man. I mean, just even take a break. The work from home thing, I think, is just like it's accelerated whatever like short fuse you already had. Like that's dwindled to like nothing. So, like in any industry, like my sister, right? Like she's a lawyer and whatever, and she just table flipped and decided to go, you know, do something different for a bit. And like, but it's just everybody I know. Like, the number of people I know who aren't burned out is like it's very, very few. You know, and it's just everyone's unsatisfied with what they're doing. So it's not just data, but I think you know, in general, the pattern that I've seen though was like everyone's trying to fit this archetype of what they think they're supposed to be doing in a career, right? And at the end of the day, it's kind of like there's probably a lot of variations in that, and like, not to say, you know, Data is a cool thing. I mean, this is the only business I've really ever been in isn't data, for 20 years now. It's like, this is all I know, so, but are there different ways of moving a career in data? Certainly there's infinite ways, I mean, like you're doing Harpreet, like that's awesome. Like that may not seem like what's archetypically data science, but it's still like cool as hell. And you should totally be doing it. Like, that's awesome. Because it's interesting, like when you look back on your career and the trajectory you take and how circuitously random everything seems, like it all, in a sense, ties together to where you are today and where you're going to be in the future, right? So it's very stochastic in that way, but
yeah, and just the present can seem infinitely long when you're in it, but in retrospect, what is 5-6 months out of a I don't know, 20 times 12, however many months that is, career, it's just a small fraction, less than 3 to 4%, right, of your entire.
Just a comment, Harpreet.
Yeah,
this is where you need an accountant. 20 months times 12, that's 120 times, so times 240. There you go.
yeah, that's what calculators are for. I'm a statistician, not an arithmetician. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, but I would say don't beat yourself up, right? If you don't feel like you're doing data science stuff, like it might also be a situation where it's like you just need to take a break or get a different manager. Because I mean, if you look at most people in their careers, I mean, it's a classic saying, people don't leave their job, they leave their managers. In a lot of cases, it's just maybe it's a team you're on or who you're working with or your manager or whatever. Like that might also be something to assess. Like, if I had a different opportunity, even in the same company, would I be doing something different and be happier? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, that has happened a lot. So, I know people work at, some of the FANGs and, depending on the team you're on, your life is either great or it's like really fucking miserable. And like, that's all it takes. So, but
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, dude, like your life, your career, it really is a single player game. You might have short bursts of teamwork when you're working on projects, but every move you make, you're not making moves for the sake of your team. You're making moves for the sake of yourself. So as long as you just optimize for whatever it is that you feel brings you the greatest amount of enjoyment for the amount of time you're trading in for a paycheck, then just do it, and just don't wonder if it's what somebody in the same job title halfway across the world is doing, I guess. It's kind of just my philosophy about that. Let me know if anybody else has any questions. If not, then we can begin to wind down office hours or happy hour. Only 14 people today. I liked it. It was chill and intimate. That's really, really awesome. You guys, hopefully you guys stay tuned for the next couple of weeks. Vivian is going to be helping me out greatly on May 21st. She's going to be hosting office hours on my behalf. So thank you so much for doing that for me, Vivian. Be sure to check out the episode I released earlier today with my friend Prachi. She is a diversity researcher in India. If you're like me, an Indian who just thought India was full of Indians, there's actually a lot of diversity in India, apparently, that I did not know about. And I learned about it. So you guys will too. So enjoy that. So it doesn't look like there's any more questions. Looks like I stalled enough. Take care, guys. Have a good rest of the weekend. Happy first birthday to my son, Jagad. I can't believe it. A year. Damn. Hopefully you start to sleep through the night now so I could as well. Guys, take care. Remember, you've got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big? Cheers, everyone.